I just want to get out of the way that many veterans have experienced far more combat than I have. I say that because I don't want anyone to get the impression that I think I'm some subject matter expert on the matter. But when I experience someone trying to kill me or someone from my team for the first time, one of the things that have stuck out to me is the loss of control I felt. Here in the United States, or most countries for that matter, even during the most austere times, you have some degree of control. If you've witnessed a bad car wreck or if you think someone's robbing your house, you can call the police. You've handed off the control of the situation to someone else. Someone else becomes accountable for the problem. If the radiator in your car breaks, you pay a mechanic to fix it. You've handed off the control of the situation to someone else becomes accountable for the problem. If you've accidentally dropped a frozen salmon in the garbage disposal along with a half a cup of Brussels sprouts and your sink gets clogged, like I did, you call a plumber. You've handed off control of the situation, someone else becomes accountable for the problem. When I witnessed someone attempt to kill me or a teammate for the first time, among the million thoughts that I had, I wondered, who do I relinquish control to? Who will solve my problem? There was no police to call. There was no ambulance. There was no plumber, although I don't really know what they would do in that situation. I was responsible to help solve the problem. Me and my gun, I was accountable for the situation. I realized that at a fundamental level, when things go to shit, I am, or perhaps we are, as a society, conditioned to take the easy way out, just like someone eating an entire pack of Ho-Hos because they feel sad. We're a society that gets what we want when we want it, and if we experience a problem that we're unable to fix, we get someone to fix it for us. I can't help but somehow feel a connection with this sentiment to what we're currently experiencing with the coronavirus. A loss of immediacy, a high level of restriction, and our inability to control the situation. There's not really an easy way out of this, unless you're like Jerry Jones and have the ability to do things like draft NFL players from the comfort of your yacht. Basically, we can't do what we want when we want it, which is the essence of a combat deployment, and an understatement when considering combat itself. I chatted with a pal of mine who was one of my longest serving friends and is set to retire soon. He's a wealth of knowledge, initially joining the military as a Marine infantryman prior to 9/11, and then moving over to the Army in 2006. He owns the best gym that I've been a member of. Particularly what makes it so special is the lack of ego, which initially inspired me to frame our conversation around the idea of fostering a first-rate team culture. But our conversation drifted to ideas about austerity, accountability, and control, and how it relates to the situation we're currently living in. Perhaps I'll save the other ideas for another time. Today we're talking to James Taulbee.
My name is James Taulbee. I was in the Marine Corps from 1999 to 2006, and still currently in the Army. I joined the Army in 2006. That's where I've been ever since. My MOS is infantry, anti-armor assaultman to be specific. I'm a veteran of Iraq in 2003, 2004, and 2005, the fun years of the war.
What about your location?
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, best city in America.
Hell yes. Wait, how'd you get the anti-tank thing? Or how'd you, that was specifically your team, or?
When you go in the infantry in the Marine Corps, first of all, that's really the only MOS that you can pick. Like if you join the Marines and you're like, I want to go infantry, they can pretty much lock that on for you. Anything else, you go in open contract. So needs of the Marine Corps. Originally, I didn't know it. I didn't know any better at the time. I was like, I want to be a tanker, and they were like, bro, you're 6'4" and you're 225 pounds. You're not going to be in a tank, and you'll thank us later for that. Which obviously I learned along the way. Yeah, thank God for that. So I was like, all right, well, I want to do that Rambo shit. And they were like, that's infantry, so you'll go infantry. in the infantry in the Marine Corps, you're either 0311, which is rifleman, your basic infantryman, or you're a weapons guy. So that would be 0331, which is machine gunner, 0341, which is mortarman, 0351, which is anti-armor assaultman. That's what I did, or 0352, which was tow gunners. So anti-armor guys too, but they do use tows instead of javelins and smalls and stuff like we do. And how did I get that? I did well on the ASVAB. They picked it for me. Typically the guys who do very well on the ASVAB and still want to go infantry, they're like, yeah, you're going to be in a weapons MOS. That's not to say that there aren't a ton of really, really smart regular riflemen, but that's the way it's always been explained to me. Is they're like, yeah, they saw your MOS, and that's why they picked you to be a 51.
Right.
Because I remember hearing you're an 0351. I was like, sweet, the fuck is that?
Yeah.
I joined the Marine Corps. It was like yin and yang, So ultimate black, ultimate white. I was like, all right, I want to do that cool Rambo shit. But by that same token, I was like, it's 1999. There's not really shit going on. There was a little flare up, in the Balkans, but doesn't seem to be much of anything. Yeah, it's probably a good time to go in the military. So, I joined and got through, boot camp right at the beginning of 2000. And then it was off to SOI infantry school and then off to weapons school, and had a very, very little bit of time at my duty station, and then boom, September 11th happened, and like the whole world got turned upside
Holy
down.
fuck.
Yeah.
So you were in before September 11th, probably as just
Yep.
like a private, I guess, right? Or Lance
Well, I was
Corporal.
Lance
Yeah.
Corporal E3. Yep.
It must have been pretty gnarly to actually be in and then have that happen, and then you just know everything's going to change.
Well, I was stationed in California, so it happened early in the morning on the East Coast. It was even earlier on the West Coast. So we showed up at zero dark, for PT as you do, and the way it would go every morning was you do PT, and then after PT's over, you turn to and shower up, and then we have to be in formation at 07, 07:30, whatever time it was. And it was so much just standing around, just like waiting for the word of the day, the word of the week, anything that needed to be passed. And so we went and did PT that morning, showered up, and we were like right in the little commons area, like at the barracks, and we waited, and like nothing. And finally the first sergeant came out, he said, no one leaves. No one goes to the PX, no one goes to the 7-day store, nothing. We thought, I don't know, somebody got caught with drugs or something.
Yeah.
We didn't know what the hell to make of it. We were like asking around, like, hey, what is this? Who got in trouble? Finally, they come out. We jump in formation. And, the first thing I noticed was the first sergeant didn't have his little clipboard in hand. He wasn't going to, like, read off, like, we have this, we have this. He goes, gents, the nation's been attacked. Pack your shit. Don't know when or where we're going, but just pack your shit and be ready. Walks away, and that's it. Turns us over to the platoon sergeants, and it was so much just like we didn't know what to happen. What was going to happen. The rest of the world was pretty much as informed as we were at that point. So the first thing we did was head to the TV room at the barracks and flip on the news, and just like everybody else, we're watching these planes hit the World Trade Center over and over and over again. Like, what the fuck just happened? Because especially even from the training standpoint, I was in 29 Palms, California at the time, so yeah, there was a little bit of desert training under my belt, but the bulk of what I had done to that point was all woodland stuff. We were still training to like fight Russia or, somewhere in South America or something like that.
Yeah.
There was no talk of Afghanistan or Iraq.
I don't think anybody even knew where Afghanistan was.
Mm-mm.
People knew where Iraq was only because we had the conflict with them earlier in the 90s, but yeah.
Well, that's the other funny thing is like, so that's September 11th, 2001. A couple months later, we're into 2002, and we just kind of figure we're going to head to Afghanistan. We were watching units go out in front of us, and we didn't go, and we didn't go, and we didn't go. We were just figured we were waiting for a turn, and all of a sudden we started hearing these whispers about like going to fight Iraq. We were like, Iraq? Didn't we smack the shit out of them back in the early 90s? Yeah, I remember. I was in like sixth grade. We're not going to go fight Iraq. And then all of a sudden, like, rumor mill turned into, we're going to war with Iraq. And we were like, okay, did we miss a memo or something? I mean, whatever, we're here to do our job. But, yeah. And then the propaganda machine started, and we heard all about, Saddam hiding weapons of mass destruction and kicking the UN inspectors out. And they got us nice and revved up. It was like poking a pit bull with a stick.
Yeah. Yeah, did they how much did they were very I think they just assumed that we were idiots in my company unless you were like a officer or something like I didn't really know anything until I was about to board the fucking plane. And by the time I deployed in 2011. So it was like well known that it was not a classified thing anymore. We were, it's public knowledge that people were going to continue to deploy. So it wasn't like I had to keep anything a secret. But then was it like, was there a time period where you had to kind of keep things kind of hidden, and then from the hit public basically?
There was not so much when we were still stateside, because, well, actually, let me back up a little bit. There was one thing that they told us to keep kind of hush hush from the civilian populace, mom, dad, girlfriends, whatever, and that was how not prepared we were. When I went to Iraq the first time, I had, your interceptor vest is designed to have two SAPI plates, one in the front, one in the back. I had one SAPI plate when I went to Iraq, and that was everyone in my unit.
Holy shit.
Everyone in the entire company was given one SAPI plate and basically told, put it in the front, because we assault, facing forward, but, yeah, that's what we were told to not convey to anyone, just to keep it to ourselves, was how not prepared we were.
Yeah.
And that really held true through, the beginning of the war. We moved so fast because we were sitting in Kuwait, just waiting. The Scud alarm would go off, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a night. And then we finally got the word, we're getting ready to push into Iraq, and to expect 30,000 casualties the first week, because they were still telling us that Saddam was going to use, like chem bio weapons on us. So we're in MOP level 1, putting our masks on, every time the Scud alarm goes off at night. And we finally get the word to push, and we did. We're going right up Route 8, which went through like all the major cities in the south of Iraq. And I never, we were talking about the little things that we remember about, being deployed. And I will never forget 2003 grown men fighting over water, because we were down to 2 canteens of water and 1 MRE a day per Marine. So I can vividly remember, there'd be somebody filling up their canteen, and somebody would, like, whether it was true or not, I don't know, but somebody call them out like, motherfucker, I saw you fill your canteens up earlier today, and then like fist fight each other over water. It was crazy.
Yeah, it's like just as primitive. It's funny.
You turn into Neanderthals like in the flip of a switch. It's amazing.
So then, so right now you're speaking to the invasion, I guess, right?
Yep.
So like, so then what was that process like, from kind of like start to finish? And then is there any stories within that ring a bell to you, basically?
Yeah, there's lots of them, but there's one, you said beginning to end, so one jumped right into my mind. So the biggest thing I would say about 2003 and the invasion was it. I went up back later on in 2004 and 2005, and it was a completely different war. And what I mean by that is in 2003, there were no forward operating bases. There was no PX. There was no, phone calls home. There was nothing. We were, snail mail writing home. We would take, the cardboard pieces of MREs and make postcards and write home. And then we would send those off. Which, by the way, if you ever look at the cardboard sleeve that your main meal comes in your MRE, it's actually got a postcard, like the dotted line on the inside of it, for you to cut out and send.
Huh.
Um, I don't know if it was like that because of us or if it was there for us, but whatever. Um, so basically, wherever we laid our head was home. We were pushing toward Baghdad, all the way through the beginning of the war. So it was a lot of sleep deprivation, just eating ripped fuel, eating coffee grounds because we couldn't stop and make a pot of coffee. Anything you get your hands on that was going to keep you awake. That's where I got my dipping habit that I kicked years ago now. I just constantly had a dip in my mouth. But I remember sleeping like I still have uniforms from the beginning of the war that have like tar patches all over them, and that's because we would like sleep on rooftops. I remember just taking a little piece of street like where like a T intersection would be and surrounding it with Constantine wire and just trying to get a couple hours of sleep there. You're literally using the curb as your pillow. There was no breaking out your isomat, no breaking out your sleeping bag, no nothing. You just went to sleep like that.
Yeah.
Um, Lots of little firefights, all the way through the beginning. It was different at the beginning of the war because it was so disorganized. We hit them so hard so quickly that they were, we got in plenty of gunfights, but um, they hadn't had time to regroup yet. Um, lots of big bodies of Iraqi troops, surrendering to us. They would have like a platoon of Marines and an entire Iraqi company or larger, coming towards you with their hands up and stuff. And now we have to detain them and wait for civil affairs guys to come get them and move them elsewhere. A story, I won't even get into like the firefights one because that's the obvious part about it. But we were in this place called Ashatra, Iraq. Little dot on the map. No one's ever heard of it unless you've been there. And Baghdad had already fallen. The Third ID had moved into Baghdad and rolled over them. And we were just, playing the waiting game in this little town, living inside a bank. It was like luxury to us. All the money and stuff was gone, so it was just nice to have, a roof over our heads for once. And we were waiting to hear, because, as you know, in order to retrograde and, leave and, start moving toward Kuwait to go home, you have to be relieved in place. And that was the big question, who was going to relieve us? And then we heard the Italian army is going to relieve you guys. And we were like, okay, didn't see that coming, but right on.
So this is towards the end of your deployment, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the very end of that first deployment.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we're waiting, for the Italian army to come relieve us. Now, credit where credit's due. Super cool guys. Super, super, super cool guys. Really happy to see us, really welcoming. They thought we lived like absolute barbarians. Like, because we were, our latrine, our head was still, a cut in half 55-gallon drum, like you see in the old Vietnam movies, like the Seabees that built us like these, like, it was like basically a three-hole outhouse. And they refused to work. The Italians were like, we're not doing anything until we set up our running water kitchen, our running water bathroom and our kitchen. Best Italian food I ever had in my life was in Iraq. But so nicest guys you'd ever want to meet in your life. Worst fucking soldiers I've ever seen. Like they're awful. They come into the bank, we welcome them. They're like, oh, where can we, drop our gear and set up shop? And we had like a little area already cleaned out for them. We're like, you can live here. And they were like, awesome. And we were at the time we were only showering like once every 3 days. We had like rigged um, a shower that came from like a water source that one of the guys had found. And we were like, you guys, you just got here, you can have the showers tonight. And they were like, oh, sweet. So they were in there doing their thing. We're like playing cards. And these guys come out to head toward the shower. And I shit you not, this is like a Marx Brothers skit or something. They all have like gleaming white terry cloth robes and flip-flops and like bikini underwear on. We're like, are we being punked right now?
Jesus
Like,
Christ.
what is happening? And we're like, okay, that's kind of weird, but whatever. So they go and they shower, they come back, and they look like they're going to the club or something. Later on that night, the first night that the Italians, got to our little AO, we got hit at the bank. You know what I mean? Like there was a decent, little skirmish. They were firing RPGs at the bank and stuff, which, you're hitting concrete and marble walls. It didn't really do anything, but so our SOP there was what I did anyways. We went up to the roof, because we would have the high ground and we could just fire down. So we're up there and we're over the ledge of the bank just returning fire. And I feel something like at my legs, like bump me, kind of like Sam does, my dog, when he's leaning against me. I look down and it's one of these Italian soldiers. He's come to the roof, but he's like sitting balled up, like by my legs, facing away from the fight. And I like kick him, and I'm like, "Hey, get up!" And he's like, "No, you're doing good." And I was like, and then that's when I realized he didn't have his rifle with him or anything.
Oh my God.
I was like, "Oh my God, you guys are gonna have a rough time in this town."
Jesus Christ.
I never did like hear how they did in that little town, Ashatra, but I hope they wised up because otherwise they had a rough time.
Oh my God. I could see the Italians being like that though. I really could.
They're just a little bit too lax, And it does, if you know your history, you kind of look at them and you go, "This is the nation where the Roman Empire came from."
So then you wrapped up that deployment, and then you spent some time, and then you had a second deployment a couple years later, right?
I did. Yeah, I went to Small Craft Company, 2nd Marine Division, which doesn't exist officially anymore. So there was this night that we went out. It was actually one of the nights that we were with Chris's team, that SEAL team. We got it was a very short suspense time, like, hey, fall in at this time, and then we're like, we're going out tonight. This is approximately where we're going. This is what we're going to do when we get there, and be ready to extract really, really quickly. Okay? So we're moving up the river at like idle speed. These boats are quiet to begin with, but at idle speed, they're like super quiet. We're like ghosts. It takes us about an hour to get there. Along the way, a thing you got to remember about, bodies of water is that while they generally stay the same, there are features underneath the water that change with the tides. And for not long, less than a minute, my boat that night got hung up on a sandbar. So the guy that was my boat coxswain, he had to like reverse the jets and like throttle up real quick. Not a big deal at all. You're very aware of the sound, but it's just like when, you're listening to something on your cell phone and you're like, shit, I gotta turn it down real quick. But the rest of the room didn't hear it. It's just loud to you. We proceed, drop the seals off where we were supposed to. We did, just the bow touch. My boat was dash 2. The boat in front of me, this guy Iverson, who I'm also still friends with today, he was always -1. We were always number one, number two. Turned in, dropped the seals off, moved up to this building, and whoever they were looking for was not there. But he had not been gone long because, like, the bed was still warm. There was, other indicating features that said that he had pieced out pretty recently. We get back on the boats, and we're headed back, and we actually get in a little bit of a gunfight on the way back. People saw us go out. I guess whether it was like the true enemy or not, whatever the definition of that is, I don't know. It might have just been, somebody being opportunistic. But got in a little bit of a fight. It never lasted long with those boats because we had GAU 17s on those boats, which are the miniguns like you see on like Predator and stuff like that. The smallest burst you can fire is it just touching the butterflies, and that's 50 rounds. Just so we get back inside the wire, doing our little debrief, and it turns out who we were after that night was Zarqawi. And we were like, holy shit, that's why you didn't tell us who we were after that night. You didn't want anybody, making any game time errors. So, but the mission went great. We didn't get the guy we were after, but whatever, that happens all the time. This is something that struck me as a leader over a decade later. That same guy who was my boat coxswain calls me. This was probably like 2012. And it was like the middle of the night. Whether he was drinking or not, I don't know. I definitely was. And he was like, hey man, do you got a minute to talk? And the answer is an obvious yes. All these years later, so that was 2005. All these years later, he was like, I can't stop thinking about that night. I was like, what are you talking about? Because that night we were supposed to catch Zarqawi. I was like, yeah, what about it? He goes, I feel like he got away because of us, or because of me, because I got hung up on that sandbar, and I had to throttle the engine up. And that was like sounding the alarm for them to get the fuck out of Dodge, and other people died because of me. And I was like, brother, number one, no. We were several clicks down the river at that point. I truly, without blowing any sunshine up your ass, truly believe that is not the case. Number two, if it's anybody's fault, it's my fault. I was the boat captain that night. You were the coxswain. You were driving the boat. I was in charge of the boat. And number three, you're thinking about things that you have no way of changing, and that might not be, for that matter. And you seem to feel a little bit better after we got off the phone, or as we got off the phone. But it hit me later on. I was like, Jesus Christ, we're all these years away from that mission, and he still takes it that seriously, and that he felt compelled to contact me in the middle of the night and talk about this. And I mean, what do you contribute that to? We had excellent leaders in that unit. We had just fantastic leaders. So much so that years and years after the fight, he was still thinking about the mission. To me, I mean, how do you quantitate leadership better than that?
That was James Taulbee, the Marine, Army infantryman, and owner of the gym Fire for Effect Athletics in Manayunk, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. If you're digging what we're doing with the podcast, you should subscribe and go to the website where we post some more information about the people we talk to. Other than that, stay chaotic, and I'll see you next time.